Hey, I'm Dan Houghton with BuilderTrend, CEO here. Super pumped to be on the Modern Craftsman podcast today. We're talking about all things related to your industry, our industry, talking about software, we're talking about labor, we're talking about material shortages, we are talking about finding business partners, we're talking about scaling your business. It's a thing of all things today with me and Nick and Tyler. Cheers.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Nick.
How are you doing?
Wonderful. I'm coming to you from the basement. I feel like we're in COVID era again. This was my office for 18 months and had back surgery last week, so I'm on the mend. I can't drive for a week and working from home.
What did you do to your back?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just wear and tear. I used to think I was a baseball player, and that's when I first started having back issues 20 years ago, and they're on and off, but herniated disc, L4, L5 for the folks that really care, So,
what level of baseball did you play?
just high school baseball.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still pretty good.
Couldn't hit. I was a catcher.
You should have said pitcher.
I know.
Then it doesn't matter if you can't.
That's right.
hit.
Yeah. That's why it ended there.
The old fake back injury.
Yeah, right. Now I'm like, I want to go back 20 years and be like, look, my back really there was a problem,
Do you still follow baseball now?
A little bit. I actually, I made a vanity investment about 4 years ago and helped bring a USL soccer team to Omaha. And so I was a lead investor in Omaha, Nebraska for that. And so we're Union Omaha, and it's like tier 3 soccer, but it's an awesome sport. I never played soccer, never went to games or anything, but I've totally got into it in the last few years.
What does vanity investment mean?
An investment that doesn't make you any money, but it's really cool.
Oh, okay.
So I would say hey, your buddy wants to start a golf course and you give him some money to start his golf course, or a professional sports team might be a vanity investment.
And they eventually pay you back, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sports teams, the interesting about sports teams is, you can make them profitable, but a lot of, even at the highest level, major league level teams, the margin for profitability is relatively thin, and where you're getting most of your value is in the valuation of a team. So what's crazy is I'm 41 years old. When I was 9 and, I had the money, I could have bought the Minnesota Twins for $67 million. Today, the minimum, major league team is going to go for probably $1 billion.
Wow.
So you just hope there's always some other guy that wants a vanity investment, or woman, 20, 30 years down the road.
I'd say that most of my investments are vanity investments. And I'm just going to tell my wife that.
Like your shoes. Every time I walk my office, I see everybody
listen, honey, this is a vanity investment.
That's a great way to put it, though.
Yeah.
It sounds way more legit.
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't need that. No, this is a vanity investment.
This is a vanity investment. It's going to make me feel better about who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for those that don't know, you're one of the founders of BuilderTrend. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
And there's there 3 of you or 4?
There's 3 of us.
3 of you. I wanted to get you on here. You and I have had a relationship for a couple of years. We've done a couple speaking engagements together, but I really wanted to get you on here and I want to take it back to when you started BuilderTrend and then why. And it's like, why have you devoted ultimately your life to construction software? And maybe even just talk about the ups and downs of boat software. Obviously, I think that, it goes without saying that, construction typically is very archaic, and the adaptability of people in the trades is very slow. But at least from my viewpoint, I think that we're in this resurgence, and people are starting to realize that, it's a great career to be in, and the demographic is truly actually becoming younger.
Yep. So
I want to talk about all things like that.
Love it. I love it. It's such a wild industry, and I do think it's amazing to me how 20 years ago, when I was starting my career, 18 years ago, the thought of going into a trade or working for a trade or a small business, just really you go to college and you go work for some Fortune 1000 company. It was kind of the American dream for a lot of us of that generation. It was mostly because our parents were on this path of, getting their pension or retiring from the same, company they worked for 20, 30 years. And that was what we grew up seeing. And that's what success looked like. And, you made that comment about why more young people are getting into it. I had a buddy of mine who got his MBA at Wharton, and, which is one of the best business schools in the world. And he was in venture capital for about 10 years. And then he called me one day and he's like, look, man, I'm going to buy this landscaping business. Will you take a look at this? And I was like, yeah, I love this. I love this idea. And I'm like, why? And he goes, because I can make more money, have more control of my destiny owning this landscaping business than I can, making sexy vanity investments into all these startups out there. And, he's like, I've never been an operator. I think I can be an operator. And I think he bought the business, it was a really good business, and it's hard to sell, a small business, a construction business or a landscaping business. And he bought it and he's had a ton of success with it. And now he's dealing with all the things that so many of your listeners and so many of our customers are dealing with, is like finding good talent, how to keep your team engaged. How do you say no to work? How do you say yes to the right work? How do you bid the right work? And so it's been a learning curve for him, but 3 years after he's done it, I ran into him and I'm like, how are you glad you did it? He's like, I'm so much happier. I'm making more money. And it's been cool for me to take kind of a business lens to, a business that typically, not a lot of guys have MBAs at, but where I struggle, I've been able to hire folks. I've been able to hire really good superintendents, project managers, and I'm really good at finances. And he's like, what I'm struggling with right now is the sales piece, quite honestly, and how to compensate my salespeople and stuff like that. So I think we have a much more entrepreneurial kind of generation than there was maybe 30, 40 years ago. And, jobs aren't necessarily sexy, whether you're an investment banker or you're owning a landscaping business. What's sexy is like creating something and feeling really proud of it. And ultimately doing what you love to do and getting rewarded for it. And it doesn't mean you have to make millions of dollars every year, but when you go home and you're happy and you're proud of what you've accomplished, we have 30,000 customers. Many of the folks I talk to when I run into them, that's the sense I get from them. And you do something and you build something from scratch. It's pretty awesome. It's really cool.
What?
How many people do you think own a landscape company and have an MBA from Wharton?
Less than 2, probably.
So our podcast got cut a little bit earlier, but you are self-admittedly our first, well, maybe not our first guest on drugs from back surgery.
Self-admittedly I'm on drugs, but I don't think I'm the first guest you've ever had.
No, well, you're the first that has admitted it, at least. Yeah. We probably had some guests who would have done better had they been on drugs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
and
prescribed drugs. I don't want to get this Elon Musk situation. All of a sudden, I've got my board members calling me and saying, "What the hell, Dan?"
Yeah, PR is gonna be like, "Guys, you got to."
Yeah, I'm gonna be in big trouble.
We've had one PR person ever reach out and say, "Hey, that's gonna come down and be edited," and we were like, "Are we serious? Like, you went into this knowing that they were gonna record?"
That's hilarious.
That's for another time. Why do you think it's so hard to sell a small business? And I think
it's intimidating. I've been fortunate enough when we started this business, over 16 years ago, we bootstrapped the business to a really big business where we had over 500 employees. And then we brought on some capital partners, Bain Capital, which is a relatively well-known private equity firm. And we made some acquisitions, but just to get in a position to sell your business takes an enormous amount of work. I mean, you could do a whole podcast on what it takes. And quite frankly, it's intimidating, and it's in some ways it can be embarrassing, from a business owner standpoint, because you really have to dot all of your I's and cross all your T's. And so someone's going to come to you, and let's just say the 3 of us are going to go buy a business, and we have, a foundation of all the right questions we need to ask, all the things we request. 9 out of 10 times, that business owner isn't even going to understand what we're asking for, and like the depths of financials we're going to push them on. And so a lot of small businesses don't get themselves in a situation to sell because they're not prepared for it. And to go hire someone to do that, there's not a lot of business brokers that are interested in selling businesses for $5 or $10 million. But the better you do of getting your financials together, you're going to be in a much better position to sell a business than you would be if you weren't. And look, like when you're operating a business, a small business, whether you have, we have 1,000 employees a day, so we're not necessarily a small business, but you don't necessarily have time to do all that stuff. So it takes an enormous amount of effort and work to get yourself set up for it. But if you do put in that time, check those boxes, you'll be in kind of rarefied air, I think, in our industry where you can actually sell that business and sell it for a multiple that you should get versus a multiple you wouldn't get if you weren't prepared.
It's funny you talk about being embarrassed, because I think that's why a lot of people avoid hiring CPAs and bookkeepers. It's like they're hiding all behind, whatever it is, the success of social media, where it's like the reality is like I'm struggling to pay my bills, but I'm showing a product because I need to show the client I know what I'm doing. But it's like the fact of the matter is you don't know what you're doing. And ultimately, whether we like it or not, it's like the client's the one paying for it. And ultimately at the biggest risk. So I've heard this saying where it's like you should build your business with the intent to sell, even though if you're not, even if you don't want to sell, when you build your business with the intent to sell, you're setting yourself up to basically go through those audits. And whether they're self-inflicted audits or they're audits that you come across that you're trying to create a valuation, or the worst when it's an IRS or an insurance audit, right? But at some point, you're going to go through this opportunity to audit the financial health of your business. And when you're trending in that direction, or in a good direction, where it's like you're like, hey, I want to create a valuable company. I want someone to come in and be like, wow, this is a really valuable asset. Now you have more control over it.
But it's 100% accurate. And, it's interesting. I think a lot of us, especially as, I'm an entrepreneur, you guys are entrepreneurs, our customers are entrepreneurs. We're not good at everything. And you have to play this role where you're CEO, your secretary, your project manager, your salesperson. And the reality is our strengths don't allow us to be good at all those things. And so you find yourself in the situation having almost like an imposter syndrome in the things you're not great at. And when you have an imposter syndrome, you don't have the same confidence that you would in your let's say you're a carpenter and you start a remodeling company. Well, you don't have imposter syndrome when you're out in the field and you're building something. But maybe in a sales meeting on telling a customer why they have to pay more for a change order, all of a sudden you kind of clam up and you have imposter syndrome. And so that's completely normal. And it's okay to feel that way. It's just owning it and recognizing it. And, some of the best experiences I've had, I've been really fortunate to be in the room with some seasoned CEOs of really large companies. And the one thing I remember the most, it was a really vivid memory of mine about 5-6 years ago, was the CEO who's probably like a legit billionaire, started his own company, it's publicly traded, like 3 or 4 times in the meeting made the same comment, like, I don't get it. What does that mean? I don't understand what you're saying. And he had enough confidence in the room to ask questions about things he didn't understand, whereas the rest of us were just nodding our heads like, okay, none of us knew what this person was talking about. We didn't understand what they were talking about, but we didn't have like the internal strength to ask, what does that mean? Because it's just a confidence thing. It's that imposter syndrome.
So as always, this podcast is brought to you by Duration Molding and Millwork. Keith sent me an Instagram post. I don't know if it's a story or I guess it's a post last week. This architectural design studio called Terra Natura. I don't know how to say it. Terra Natura Design out in California. They were building a fence made of steel tubing and then boral
I saw that on their Instagram.
Yeah. So like they're building essentially a fireproof fence around the property. So it'll be decorative. It'll look nice, but it's also put in place to kind of withstand fires and heat, so they can put a perimeter around their entire property and stop the fire before getting to the house, which I had never really considered for their product. But obviously with its fire resistant capacity and characteristics, that's a really good opportunity to use it. And they're going to be building something that looks really nice. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 there, but I can, I'll try and get the details to the post. It's not finished at this point, but it's definitely like a 6-foot fence around the property.
This actually reminds me of, we had a project where we had some wood trim that got too close to the manufacturer's specifications of a range.
Oh yeah.
and the inspector was like, you got to take it down. That should be all tile. It's got to be, a fire resistant material. And I think we ended up replacing it with tile, but thinking back, we could have replaced that trim with boral or the true exterior and just had it, custom molded, painted, and then the inspector probably would have thought it was wood, but we could have proved otherwise. Again, this is, just off cuff here, but like thinking about mantles when you deal with like really close, reveals, and maybe sometimes that clearance isn't totally, by code, or you're trying to kind of skate by something. Maybe there's an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it'll be interesting to see this fence project kind of take place, and if that's something that takes off out there. I know that they're going below grade with steel, so it's not, it's not just ending on the surface of the ground there. But I'll dig into that a little bit more and follow up with that maybe when they post some final pictures.
Cool. If you guys want to find out more about Duration Millwork, head over to durationmillwork.com. Follow them on Instagram, Duration Molding and Millwork. This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool. So you guys have heard us talk about it, the R-Class program. They continue to, it's a great community of builders. I've been running a couple of new projects that we have going on, and one of them being another passive house. And we've been talking about the exterior details. And of course, we've learned a ton about the exterior installation details down in our Rhode Island passive home. We're not dealing with exterior in our Needham project, but we have these other projects coming up, and Rockwool just continues to be a community that I can bounce ideas off. And I've said it before, but one of the things I appreciate, it's not always about their product. Their technical team is looking at the entire assembly. And then, of course, they're going to be, trying to utilize their product where they can, but they'll suggest a different product if it truly makes sense to do that.
Yeah, I was just looking, I think I was watching a podcast on Instagram, or just a clip, a reel, and they were showing all different angles of the studio, and I'm pretty sure that I spotted some Rockwool insulation, which I would assume was being used for soundproofing. But they had everything with textiles hanging over everything, and there was like one corner where I'm like, that's definitely Rockwool.
We actually ordered acoustical panels for that big loft space we renovated last year
from them.
Not from Rockwool, but they were acoustic panel. I forget who made them, but when we got them, that's exactly what it was. It was a Rockwool comfort board, and it was wrapped in a really nice fabric.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
I have a lisp. If you guys want to learn more about the R-Class program, head over to rockwool.com/rclass. This podcast is brought to you by Upstate Merch. Dylan is our go-to guy for all of our swag, whether you're getting the swag for free because you left an iTunes review for the Modern Craftsman, or you head over to the link in our bio and order the stuff. All of that streetwear is coming right from Upstate Merch, custom printed. I have a box behind me. I just got another 60 polos for my team. We had sent the polos over to him. Dylan turned those things around super quick. I'm not promising that he's going to be super quick for everyone. I think he just likes me, but he only because he's super busy. But if you guys want, he's got some of the best deals for contractor t-shirts, and he can help with the design and everything.
Yeah, which reminds me, I have to get some new hats. For some reason, we have flies flying around my house, as you could see on this podcast. I've been chasing a fly, and I've been using my hats, which is of no reflection on him, but they have a plastic clasp in the back. And I keep holding my hat by the brim of it and going to smack flies and snapping the plastic clasp.
Oh my God.
So I guess I need some fly traps and some new hats. I don't think he sells fly traps though, but I'll check.
Yeah, we can check. Head over to upstatemerch.com or email him info@theupstatemerch.com. And if you mention the Modern Craftsman podcast, you'll get 10% off your first order.
That's so true. And I think that's very indicative of our business as a whole. People are afraid to ask questions and not know the answers to it. And I was very similar in the beginning of my career, where you'd go to the building department or speak to an older contractor and just be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then just try and go and figure out the answers later. And at this point in my life, if I don't know something, or if I don't know what an inspector wants from me, I'm just reaching out directly to them and being like, hey, what do you want me to do in this situation? and it's just so much easier to ask. And looking back on it, it's like I would have gotten so many more nights of sleep had I just been like, I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
want me to do? And ask. It's
You-
so simple.
I want to take this back further than even starting my business. This, in my opinion, goes back to school, like early days of school, being the kid in first, second grade, third grade. When the teacher was teaching something, no one wanted to be the kid that raised their hand and said, I don't get that. Because then it's like everyone points and laughs, even though I'm making these numbers up, but probably 90% of the class had no idea what she was talking about. But you're exactly right. And I remember, I remember very vividly I think it was either high school. I'm saying vividly, and now I don't remember, but I think it was high school that I made this like conscious decision where it's like, you know what? I'm just always going to ask when I don't know. And I think about, my career going forward. I just went to this event, hosted by Jocko, and it was the same thing. And I talked about this at the event where I've just chosen to be the person that I'm going to ask the question. As dumb, as stupid as it might sound, I'm asking the question because I know that I'm doing someone else a favor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why you're asking. You
Well,
know the
I
answer. You're
shouldn't say
just
that.
trying to help everyone else out.
I shouldn't say that. I know that I don't know the answer, and there's someone else there that also doesn't. And I remember there was a specific question I asked at this event, and this guy walked up to me after and was like, dude, thanks for asking that. I had the same question. I just didn't feel like raising my hand. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the problem, is that we're like shamed into like having to know all these things. And all of these people are going through life or in business, not asking the right questions and putting themselves in harm's way intentionally because of the fear of being embarrassed. Like when you say that out loud, that sounds incredibly asinine.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My approach is a little bit. It's been like almost empathetic leadership, and saying like just being really upfront with people. Like I don't know everything. I'm not that smart of a guy. Like I think from my perspective, if I am the dumbest guy in the room and all these people work for me, I've done my job. And quite frankly, like people love to talk. So if you're asking like a legit question, I mean, there's always like the person in the room that asks the question just to like be a look at me kind of question, and it doesn't even make any sense, and they're using big words and the whole room's confused. But just like basic questions, I'm saying, can you clarify what this means? The person on the receiving end loves to clarify what that means. And it takes me back to like my college days. My roommate, a good friend of mine, is an interventional radiologist, and he would go and argue his grades and ask questions in undergrad. Like he'd get like an A minus and be like, no, I think this should be an A plus. Tell me why this was an A minus, and really kind of dig in with the professor. Professors love that. They're like, this kid cares about his grade. He's getting an A minus. He wants an A plus, and he would get every grade flipped to an A plus by asking the questions. And it's because I think generally people want to make sure when they're communicating with you that you do know what they're saying and they understand it. And if someone that really cares about their messaging, like if you don't understand what I'm saying, then I'm not very good at what the messaging is. And I think that goes a lot specifically. I built a house this last year. It can really happen in our industry where I think a contractor can speak fast, over talk the customer, and really dialing it back and saying like, managing their expectations from a communication standpoint on like, look, this is the first time they've done that. This might be the 50th project we've had in the last 3 years, but we've got to kind of dial it back, bring it down to an elementary level for our customer because they just don't know. And if they don't know, that means their expectations could be like completely like different, 6 months from now when we get done with this project.
Yeah, that's also true. I think that I also would somewhat attribute that to a confidence thing where like there's a fine line between not saying enough and saying too much.
Yeah.
Where early on in my career, I didn't want to say too much because I didn't want to say something that could potentially be incorrect. And then it got to a point where I wanted to say more and kind of justify what I was doing. And at this point now, 12, 13 years into it, I'm back to like, I just want to say what I have to say. And then you guys make a decision at that point. I don't want to justify and I don't want to really overspeak to this. You have specific questions, fine. And I'm okay with just saying enough now. Like, I don't have to justify myself any more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like you said about the big words, that becomes such filler in a conversation. When people start not understanding words, they tune out. where like you say at the elementary level, with our clients, we're dealing with complex systems and processes to build a house or build software or sell software, where you got to really just like dumb it down, and not because they're stupid or they're dumb. It's just they don't like this is stuff that they don't understand, and they're entrusting us as the professional to solve a problem.
Yeah, and it's so personal. I mean, the home, whether it's a commercial project or a residential project, it's such a personal experience, and it's a lot of money. And I relate it to like I think, if I remember this correctly, in like journalism, like when you write a newspaper article, you're writing it for a fourth grader, so a fourth grader can understand and read that article. And in some ways, when you're communicating with your customers, not to treat them like a child, but to understand like that this is, to your point, Nick, like this is a big deal to them. One of the biggest, amounts of money they'll ever spend on one thing in their life, and they don't know like a lot. And that's why I think you see so much conflict in our industry when there shouldn't be. It's you've got a tough kind of one-time, two-time customer, and you've got in many cases a contractor whose skill set is not necessarily delivering the message, kind of like we were talking earlier, but maybe being a great carpenter. And so I think the best contractors I've seen, really in my career, and we've worked with the best of the best, are the ones that have really honed in and really focused on that messaging and that communication to their customers. At the end of the day, they know they can deliver a product. You can deliver the best product in the world, but if your customer isn't happy at the end, like that's tough. That's a tough deal. And that happens all the time in our industry. And a lot of it's just because we're not managing their expectations, or the communication's just a little off. And that's one of the biggest challenges of our industry and what I see with our customers.
So you said that you started this business 16 years ago. You're 41, so that'd take you to 25.
Yeah.
What were you doing, from 21, assuming you went to college, until 25?
Well, I don't know if all of it's appropriate for a podcast, but
living the dream, more drugs.
Right. I was not a great student by any means. I didn't have there weren't a bunch of companies knocking on my door, at career day on saying you should come work at this company. And so I actually got real lucky. And I tell this story to all of our new hires. I went to all the kind of typical places I would hire a new college grad in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was like 0 for 6. And, I wasn't even getting second interviews, and I didn't really know why. I didn't practice my interview. I thought I was just charming enough to get any job that I wanted. And I was lucky enough that I got a job at a small software company when I was 22 years old. And that was kind of my intro into technology. And it was, software as a service is a relatively new, not a new term, but it's a term that a lot of people that follow software know. And that's basically delivering software on the internet. It's a subscription, whether you're paying it annually or monthly. And that was a new concept 18, 19 years ago. And the company I was working for was doing that in the insurance industry. And so my two partners, Steve and Jeff Duggar, they're brothers, and they're like the smartest guys in the world. They were living the dream. They were, doing their own thing. They were independent contractors building websites and these back-end kind of small business solutions for companies like contractors to suppliers, to, fraternities and sororities, to restaurants, you name it. They were building all these random little kind of business tools for them. And, when we were 23, 24, none of us had partners or, and we were sitting around drinking beer, and they were telling me about how they had ran into 2 or 3 contractors in Omaha, Nebraska, home builders who were asking for the same thing. And I was like, kind of light bulb, there's a lot of home builders, contractors in the world. And I know my skill set was, I know how to get this out to a massive audience, and your guys' skill set is, how to build this. And so we started the company that way.
Why did you think at that time that you had the ability to get it to a massive audience?
Well, so the technology like Zoom was like it was just on the forefront there. And it was WebEx was like the first kind of online meeting tool. And so I was selling software in a way like this to companies all throughout North America. And so it used to be literally you'd go to an airport, and this is no joke. And then early in my career, you'd be at Chicago and O'Hare, and you'd see the same 12 sales reps from Oracle, IBM. There was a company called PeopleSoft, and a few other stragglers, and you'd see the same people all the time. And it was like this enterprise kind of traveling, sales reps. And there was like 5 or 6 really big software companies, and it was only for the biggest companies in the world. There wasn't software solutions for the SMB market. So now you hear about companies like Toast for restaurants, and MindBody, which is for like yoga studios, and Appfolio, which is for like rental companies. And these are multi-billion-dollar companies that have focused on one vertical market, and typically the SMB market. And that wasn't existent in 2006, so it wasn't sexy. It wasn't cool that we were doing it. We actually started the company before the iPhone came out, which is pretty wild. So the App Store wasn't even in existence before we started the company.
And this was, you were immediately into the home building side.
Yeah, we went right into the home building side because it was 2005, 2006. And, you guys are younger than me, but it was like, if you wanted to be a home builder in 2005, you could like just say you're a home builder and you'd make money the next day. And so everybody in the United States was a home builder. The lending requirements, there's been, many movies, some of the best movies ever made were kind of about the collapse of the financial Great Recession. And, home building was the tip of the iceberg. It's, it was really interesting. I learned a lot being an entrepreneur early. We had, amazing success early. And then literally it's like one day the lights got turned off on us. And it was scary. We had a couple customers in Omaha, Nebraska that committed suicide. We had customers that were going to jail, like literally hearing from our customers every single day, like, we're out of business, I'm in trouble. Like, and all these businesses, they were family businesses. Like, Nick, I think you talked about your dad being in this industry. It wasn't just like one family was going down. It was their entire family was going down. And, massive companies that were building hundreds of homes were just falling apart like as fast as possible. And, we had to pivot pretty fast, but it was a pretty scary time.
How many customers did you have at that point?
Hundreds, I think at that time, maybe 400, 500 customers.
Yeah. And
so, which is a lot of customers, it's not 30,000 today, but it was a lot of customers. And so every customer mattered. Not like, every customer matters today, but it was scary. I'll never forget, if your customers or the listeners have ever been to the International Builder Show, there was this it's 2009 or 2010. And this is like, Nick, you've been there, some of the biggest shows in the world, 100,000 people. There was literally no one there. Like no one. It was the most bizarre, scariest thing in the world. It was just vendors and like a few people just walking through, and it was eerie and it was scary. And, it was probably the toughest time of my career, but we survived it. And like I always tell people, it's kind of like the Forrest Gump scene where he couldn't catch any shrimp. And then all of a sudden the hurricane comes through and, like he's the only shrimping boat. That was kind of us with construction software, from 2008 and 2012.
Well, if you started a business relatively early, you were young and you were probably super excited. Hey, this is growing. It's catching on. Technology is improving. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, you know what? We're going to take a break real quickly. And then like at that point, how do you rebound back? Like, do you just hunker down and wait for things to turn around, or what did you guys implement to try and just keep your heads above water?
We actually, so we never didn't grow through that period of time. So, when you're not that big, it's a little easier not to go backwards. But I remember, I'll never forget, I think we had like 15 employees, and I kind of sat everyone down. And I was just like, look, we need to do more. It's the expectations. If you were doing, 10 things today, I need you to do 20 things today. And it was really an ask. And it was a scary time. People were losing their jobs, and our early team, which many of them are still with us today, they responded in such a positive way. And obviously that financial recession, that Great Recession, lasted longer than your typical recession. But we continued to grow. We continued to invest in marketing, and that was probably the smartest thing we did. Is we didn't peel back everything. We just really focused on where we could deliver an ROI on our dollars spent, and not peeling back the marketing, which pretty much all of our competitors did at that point, led us to, make a little growth during the toughest periods.
So what was your biggest overhead at that point that you were looking to manage? Was it employees?
Employees, yeah, for sure. So I'll never forget, we used to do we had audit. So the first thing, the best advice I ever got was when you with your company, get a CPA, get a lawyer, and do automatic payroll. So go sign up with one of these automatic payroll companies. And when we did that, we didn't actually automatically give ourselves payroll. So we paid ourselves. That was $24,000 a year we paid ourselves. But we said we'll pay ourselves by check just in case we can't meet payroll. And fortunately, we were able to meet payroll every single year, every single pay period.
It's funny because I remember having this conversation with my CPA when I hired her, and she said, "You're not on payroll." I'm like, "I know. I'll just do a draw when needed." She goes, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
I'm like, "What's the big deal?" She goes, "The sooner you have that on automatic, the sooner you forget about it.
Yep.
You stop thinking about it and you stop making decisions based on the fact that you don't get paid."
Yep.
Were you an LLC at that point, Nick?
Yeah, I was.
So it doesn't, from a tax perspective, it doesn't really matter whether you draw that or not, right?
Right. Which now I'm an S corp or an LLC, but I file as an S corp. So
Yeah.
Which still doesn't really matter because it passes through.
it passes through, but there is a payroll component that you're supposed to have like a reasonable comp on.
Payroll tax is where you're getting hit on it. But it's super good advice. I'm invested in a handful of businesses outside of BuilderTrend, and the first thing I always say is like pay yourselves, like get yourself on payroll because it's not real. It's easy to kind of like you see so many contractors go in and out of business because they're kind of just job to job, and if they make money, they make money. But like when you start paying yourself a salary, it's very real, and I think it also gives you a way to think about, to the earlier point, Nick, about how to set yourself up for financial success. Like that's part of your expense is yourself. Yeah, right. You need to know that.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a lot of guys get into this because they love the trade and they want to be in business. But they stay fixated on the fact that they're trading time for money. And it's like, no, I make 75, $100 an hour, whatever it is, like doing, work. But it's like, sure, but you should be making more than that. You own the business. You are taking the risk. You are putting and you might be estimating the job at $100 an hour at $800 a day. But the reality is you've been working 12, 14-hour days for the last 6 months. So you're making, half that, at the end, whatever it is, it's, I'm just going to repeat what you said. It's great advice, and you have to set these things up. The CPA and the lawyer, 100%. And everyone always asks me like, "Hey, this is where I'm at in my business. What would be your move?" And I always say, like, the biggest mistake I made is I waited too long to get, a good accountant, a good CPA, and a good lawyer.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to pay them and use them. Like I think it's always funny, like people that if you bill by the hour, it's like they have the biggest problem with paying by the hour too. But like I mean, the folks that they're your business partners, and if you spend $15,000 a year with your lawyer and $15,000 a year with your CPA, that's $30,000. Like think of them as an extension of like another employee of your company. If you could pay an employee $30,000 to give you legal advice and finance advice, you would do it. And so they're experts, and you're paying for that, and that's okay. That's part of doing business.
And it's funny, especially when you're interviewing for them. Most of them will go through hey, listen, my fee's $15,000 a year, and then there'll be the but. And I know, and it's always like, and I always stop. I'm like, I know you're gonna save me 15, or you're gonna save me 20,000. I understand, but they're not wrong. Where it's like, hey, your CPA, $15,000 a year, they should be coming to you with tax strategy that says, hey, I know you're paying me 15 grand a year, but these are the things that I'm going to make sure that you implement. That's going to give you a tax credit of $45,000.
Yep.
And it's like, so the $15,000 investment is now 3x.
One bad contract can put your business to bed, and so it's just, I mean, you see it all the time. And again, I don't know if you could probably hire or you can get a construction lawyer on here that can talk all day long about that. But it's part of setting yourself up for success. I mean, being a little organized, if it's not your strength, just bringing on really good partners I mean, if you're not a lawyer, if you're not a CPA, you should hire a lawyer or a CPA to help you run a business if you want to be a real business. If you just want to have a side gig and it's a side hustle and you want to do decks on the weekend, like that's a little different. But if this is like your strategy and your goal to build a business, to build a career that, you could either sell or pass on, and then you got to take the right steps right out of the gate.
going back to 25 years old, starting a software company, you having this, like, you've been immersed in software. You didn't create the software, right? You
No.
weren't so what about, like, talk about that in that moment. It's like, hey, we're going to start a software company to help fix the home building industry. What's step one?
Step one was really the original, like, couple customers. Honestly, it was really driven by a few things. Like, it was really driven by the communication challenges and approvals that many home builders were having with their customers and their subcontractors. And so, like, the very first version of BuilderTrend, I mean, BuilderTrend is a million things today. But the first version of it was a schedule that you could share with your homeowners and your subcontractors. It was a photo sharing solution. It was a document sharing solution, and it was a change order management solution. So I could submit a change order to a homeowner. They could electronically approve it. And that was really the genesis of BuilderTrend. And still, if you just had those four things a day, still a good entry product for many, many of our customers. And so it was just, we would talk to these handful of builders in Omaha, Nebraska, and the issue they were having was they were losing money on change orders. They had like a paper tracking system where they would have a conversation with a spouse, and the spouse would say, yeah, do it, but like the husband or the wife didn't approve it, and they install like the wrong countertop, and there goes $20,000. And so it was just a way to like kind of like dot your I's and cross your T's. And these were forward-thinking, contractors, and those original customers, they're still in business today. Our first customer built my house last year, was our first customer, 15 years ago. And so, like, I think they were forward-thinking, both from a standpoint of understanding what technology meant for their businesses, but also good business people. And there was nothing out there, for them.
But
That's that my question to you was, who were you, like, you're starting this business, it's almost you're creating it from scratch, from nothing. Whose structure were you kind of following, or what model were you looking at to kind of justify what you were doing with this business, or was it just all made up?
Well, a lot of it was made up. I mean, I can say that now. 15 years ago, I wasn't saying that. But a lot of it was based off my experience just getting that first job, of like understanding, like, look, reoccurring revenue is a great business model. We have to make it easy for our customers to sign up. We have to make it easy for them to use our software. And the beauty of our industry is it doesn't have to be perfect. We weren't dealing with like enterprise level customers that, were selling a financial suite of products to a Fortune 100 company. So there was a lot of room to kind of provide a minimal viable product to the customer, and they would give us feedback. And the one theme that we took was, let's not get cornered by one customer. Our customers are loud, and they'll say, we need this. If it was, consistent through our customer base, then we would go build it, and we wouldn't just build one-off custom software for a specific customer.
Yeah. I'll try and word this question the best that I can. So you start this business and you have a fee basically for a membership. You still have a fee for that membership, but it's not like that fee can go up exponentially. So how are you structuring that fee in the beginning to kind of cover yourself for 10, 15 years later? I understand, the more customers, the lower price per customer that could be, because you just have more volume at that point. But being that you're creating this software for a smaller amount of customers, have you just built on the software, or is it like just a massive investment for you guys to develop this? Hopefully you'll get the numbers 10 years down the road.
Yeah. I mean, we were lean and mean, like super lean and mean. And I mean, the best analogy from like in construction, if you needed 4 carpenters to get the job done, we had 1 carpenter, and that 1 carpenter just worked all around the clock. And that was one of the co-founders, Jeff Duggar, who was our lead developer. So a lot of it was driven by, back in that day, the average software kind of purchase, you were used to paying a setup fee or a big license fee one time.
Yeah.
And we would charge like an annual maintenance fee. And so that's how it was structured. So we were getting like $5,000 or $10,000 for a setup fee, and then they'd pay us $5,000 a year for the software. Today, we've eliminated, over the years, the setup fee, and now it's, it's $300, $400, $500 a month to use our software, and much easier to get into. And you can get in or get out if you want to at any time.
I forgot about that. I feel like everything that you signed up for had an initial
I set up
setup fee. It's
Yeah.
like, damn, I got to pay this much to get into this, and
Yeah.
we're in the era of now of that you could buy something for like a day if you want it.
Yeah.
Now.
It's amazing. It's good. It's right. Speaking of a day, like we were talking about payroll earlier, there is going to become a time soon, I think, from a payroll period where you pay your people daily. Think about what
That's
a weird
crazy.
think about a weird archaic thing. Like you have to wait 2 weeks to get paid. Like you did the job today, you should get paid today. And like that's possible. It will come soon. It will come in our career, I'm sure.
But I'm sure that having that lower entry fee for people, it opens up your doors to customers as well, right? Because now somebody can try your product for a month, and if they don't like it, they didn't just invest $10,000.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's kind of for us, it's a bit of there's two challenges when it comes to software. Not having a committed customer is always a challenge, right? So, they can sign up and they're kind of into it and they don't really care. They just want to try it out. They want to see what it's like. That's not necessarily going to be good for their business because they're not making a commitment to something. When you have a committed customer, they're the ones that end up being customers for years. So, the good thing is we want to break all the barriers, though, to make it – we don't want to make it hard for someone to, at least experience what this is and try it and see if it's a good fit for their business.
I'm thinking about the hiring side of it, and I think this does relate back to something you said earlier, Dan. Is this conversation is really about people that want to grow, and there's unless you're trading time for money and you're okay with that, and building decks on the weekends, whatever side hustle, totally. But from a growth perspective, I just did quick math. I'm looking at all right, you have 30,000 customers, call it $500 a month. $15 million a year in revenue, but then you have 1,000 employees, and that's $15,000 per employee. I'm doing rough math here, right? Yeah. So it's I'm looking at that, and something you said earlier, it's okay, we took on a capital investor, Bain Capital. So off the hand, that doesn't compute.
I think your
right?
math's wrong.
Yeah, I think the math's
wrong
too.
You did per month, not year.
Did I?
We did 30,000 employees or 30,000 memberships per month.
I'll give you this. We're a profitable business that has different ways to monetize our customers through our services. So the subscription is not the only way we're monetizing our customer. But what's interesting, I think where you're going with this, in software versus almost all of their businesses, is that one of the only industries where they'll allow you not to be profitable, but your valuation in the public markets will be exceptionally high. We've had a little bit of a pullback in the last 6 months, but a lot of that's because you're betting on growth. And so our partners, when some of the best private equity firms come to us, what they liked about what we were doing was we acquired Co-Construct, which was our biggest competitor. Started at about the same time we started. Donnie Wyatt was the founder of that business. Awesome guy. Built this great business, and they were about a third the size we were, and we were always kind of just fighting with each other in the market. And so naturally, kind of the acquisition, something we tried to do for years, and made a lot of sense to kind of put two heads together to go attack one problem. And it was just about owning a market segment. And so, to acquire 30,000 customers is a massive undertaking. And I'll speak to your listeners, because there are customers as well, they're hard to get to. And to the earlier point Tyler made is they're just a lot of times they just want to check it out, see if it's the right thing. It's hard to get them to commit to things because they're so busy just operating their business. And so that to acquire 30,000 customers and kind of have ownership of the market is pretty rare and pretty unique. And so it takes a great effort to do that. We make 20,000 outbound phone calls a day. We're doing hundreds and hundreds of training sessions per day with our customers. Nick, I don't know if you've ever been to our office. I think you have.
Yeah.
There's a vibe there where it's it's a machine.
So I was going to get to that. So first off, I did do the math wrong. And I'm aware of that. I'm 10x more than that. So I wasn't getting at the fact that you weren't profitable, but you did take it exactly where I wanted, is that, there's market, trying to get the market share. And I want to get into the Co-Construct acquisition and what that looked like, because I think that related to construction, I shouldn't say I'm oftentimes, but there's scenarios where someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to shut down my company and I'd love to come to work for you. And it's like, that's basically, and he could come with everything in his business, his people. And I think about like, what does that look like? How do I structure that? But to speak on your office for a minute, I remember going there and I was super skeptical. My story with BuilderTrend started with a cold call, of course, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely not. They got me in. I was really, really lean at the time. I had no help in the office. It was this fee I was paying for a few months. And I'm like, and I canceled. And I was like, I just don't have the time to learn this. And I remember, and I had hired maybe 2 or 3 more people in the span of a few months. And I was like, I need that. And I went back. I was like, hey guys, I'm cold calling you. I want to reinstate.
Yeah.
And I got it. I had worked with you guys for years. But at one point, you guys invited me to come check it out. And I remember going in, and I mean this in the most respectful way. Like when I came around the sales floor, I was like, this is Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
This is like, these guys are crazy. Like there's so many people here, all like walking around, like making phone calls like crazy. I'm like, this is wild. And I remember rounding the next corner and I'm like, what? This is a different group of people. And it was the customer service side. And in that moment is when I solidified. I was like, okay, I'm working with the right company, because that guy over there, yeah, he's making 100 something calls a day and he got me to sign up. But on the other side, there's an equal person over here saying, hey, Nick, I know you signed up. I know you're paying. How can I make your experience better? And that was huge, because like and I think at that time you had just hired your 500th employee.
Okay. Yeah.
It was somewhere around that time. But yeah, I mean, it was like that was the best part, for you guys. And through all the years we worked together, it always seemed to be that ebb and flow, where it's like, I'd still get cold calls every once in a while. I'm like, guys, I'm already working with you. And they're like, sorry, click. But it was equal, like, hey, I'm your coach, or, hey, we're working on this. Do you want to test this out? Or, hey, is there anything that we can do to improve your process? I mean, I remember, I don't know if Brad, Deanan, is it Deanan?
I don't know.
I'm saying his last name wrong. And
Okay.
But he's been with you guys forever, and he was my original coach, and he has worked his way up. But I remember I would email him and he would get back to me with like a video on how to fix something within like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so I was always impressed by that. Going back to the acquisition and kind of the growth of the company, and obviously, yes, I understand you guys are profitable, but the bringing on an investor, or let's just talk about the acquisition of Co-Construct. You guys started at similar times.
Mm-hmm.
I think about 2 contractors and one in a similar area, right? They're both
Coke and Pepsi. It was like Coke and Pepsi.
Right. And so what led to the decision to join forces?
Well, it was interesting. Donnie had brought on a growth equity partner to help him scale the business maybe 4 years ago, who I knew them really well, a company called Sarah Capital, who's also now with us. And so, once you do that, you kind of are setting yourself up for some kind of exit or next kind of phase. And so once he did that, the opportunity for us to combine forces became a lot more realistic. And, for me, it was like, why beat each other up to try to do the exact same thing? I mean, really, at the surface level, the products, Tyler, you could be using Co-Construct, Nick, you could be using BuilderTrend, you could both be happy. You both could be kind of like rave reviewers, and that's a good thing. And so, and we were focused on such a core segment of, same audience. It was like, these companies should just come together and really like use our scale to be able to create some really interesting things, is what we're working on now. And so it was hard though. I mean, this deal came together the peak of COVID. Nobody was ever, it was all like on Zoom like this. And imagine like a huge acquisition, Donnie, had 160 team members, and trying to get 160 team members to believe like, oh, by the way, I'm like the evil competitor over here. Now I'm your boss, and you should like me, and you should believe in everything I say. And it took time and it took effort. And one of the things I said to that group is just like, it's all about trust, it's all about transparency, and it's all about communication, and that's my job, for you to believe in what we're trying to accomplish. And look, we're going to need a ton of people. We're hiring a ton of people to go accomplish this. So I'd rather have you on my team. What we're trying to accomplish already. You already know our customer base. And so for the most part, the integration took literally 18 months for the companies to fully come together.
Wow.
And it was a lot of hard work and took a lot of effort, but, successfully we've been able to do that. And so, most of our effort today is really going into the BuilderTrend platform, the brand's BuilderTrend. We're not sunsetting CoConstruct. So if someone's using CoConstruct, they can use it. We're updating it and keeping it fresh. But really all the big things that we're changing, like we just integrated an online takeoff solution that we acquired. And so, into BuilderTrend literally yesterday, which is pretty exciting. Something we've been working on for months.
Which one?
What's that?
Which one?
We acquired Square.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we never made a formal announcement, so this is our formal announcement that we acquired them. I'm sure
go.
You'll get the PR call tomorrow.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, and so the Square team was awesome, and we did a bunch of customer interviews with CoConstruct users and BuilderTrend users, and it just landed well. It was a web-based solution. Their team was super innovative, and so we are now a family of multiple companies. CBUSA, which is a GPO, is under the BuilderTrend flag now, and so we're doing a lot of interesting things in the material sourcing space, in the financial space, with through payments and paying your subcontractors, receiving payments. So it's becoming a lot more than just software. We're bolting on a lot of different things, and that's really been the strategy. Is like, how can we most impactfully make our customer successful by helping them with other things outside of just software? And the reason we can do that is because we have a base of 30,000 customers, and everybody's interested in that. Like, a lumber producer is interested in our 30,000 customers because they're hard to get to. It's not DR Horton. That's not our customer.
So what's the long-term goal with CoConstruct if most of your resources are going into BuilderTrend?
So, I think to be transparent, the goal with CoConstruct is like, we want to keep those customers as happy as possible. And so if they are loving CoConstruct and the timing's not right for them to make a shift over to the platform, that's totally okay. Like, we're not going to force anybody to jump ship or do anything. I think long-term, the goal is that the investment dollars going into BuilderTrend, the platform our customers that are using CC will long-term say, like, there's more advantages for us to be on BuilderTrend at this point. And so, we're going to make it really easy for them to make that jump when they're ready, but we're not going to, force anybody. We've got, 6,500 customers using CoConstruct every day. And so that's a massive shift to get that amount of customers. And we want to make it as least disruptive to their business as possible.
So essentially, though, you'd like to be shifting everyone over to BuilderTrend if at all possible, or is CoConstruct to remain kind of open as potentially like less involved, more budget-friendly option?
No, long term, we'd like to get everybody to where we're putting all our R&D dollars to.
Sure.
So they can stay at CoConstruct for as long as they want, but the reality is we are spending tens of millions of dollars on research and development on the BuilderTrend platform. And if you really care about your business, you're going to want to be probably on the best platform long term. Not saying that has to happen today, 6 months from now, even 2 years from now. But I think if I was a contractor, I'd probably want to be where all the money was being spent.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I do know other companies who have acquired other businesses where they're similar businesses. Yep. And they kind of mesh them and become one. And then the long-term goal there is to kind of keep those businesses separate. They're all under the same umbrella, but one is a higher level, higher functioning business, and the other one's for people who don't necessarily want all of that.
Yep.
And then a lot of times some of the older technology is getting passed down. So like if something were to come out on BuilderTrend now, that could be technology that when the next re-up comes on that, they're now passing that down to CoConstruct. So I've seen that with businesses before. I was just curious if that was the case with you guys.
So what we really did is we looked at both of them. We brought in a, outside party to really take a good kind of analytical approach on like best of both. And so we took a lot of things out of CoConstruct and we added them to BuilderTrend.
Yeah.
And they were doing some things a lot better than we were, and vice versa. So we took a lot of good things out of there. The challenges, and we've got essentially 3 different product suites, kind of like an entry level, mid level, and a more enterprise level solution. But the real challenge was maintaining 2 separate platforms from a cost standpoint is extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to do everything twice. And so for us, it was, we spent time thinking, like, is that to your point, Tyler, like, does it make sense to have both brands selling both ways? And at the end of the day, we took a good look at it. It's like, no, like the big investment needs to be on the same platform, because it's not cost effective to try to build 2 things at the same time.
Yeah, especially if they're similar. I feel like then you're giving each system either 50% or 75, 20%.
Exactly.
Nobody's getting all the attention that they deserve.
And the crazy thing is, like, again, it kind of goes back to, like, the products were so similar in so many different ways, where, like, it's kind of like, which one did you choose first?
Yeah.
So it was a great marriage, and it's been an incredible experience to work with all the folks from Co-Construct. And it's been from my standpoint, I was talking to our board last month, and I was like, it's just been an awesome experience, because they've been so open, about what they want to accomplish, and the teams have worked really well together. And we're actually having our first meeting with everybody. All 1,000 people are going to be in Omaha next week. I've been out to Charlottesville, Virginia, where Co-Construct's based out of, but this is the first time we're going to have all 1,000 employees together, and we're going to celebrate kind of the companies finally being one company, which is exciting.
And when did you acquire them?
February of 2021.
Okay, so it was post-COVID.
Yeah, so it was kind of we were still remote, and it was basically, it was just a bizarre time to do a deal like that, but.
But at the same time, I feel like it's almost ideal, because everyone is so used to working remotely, and it's like we're acquiring this business halfway across the country, and it's almost normal to be like, well, that's where we're based out of, but we work here, and everyone is working remote.
I think you're 100% accurate on that. I mean, it probably gave us a lot of benefits that we wouldn't have had, and it took us 6. It's crazy. Once we got it, it was like, now what? Because 2 competitors, you don't get a lot. You don't really get to look, under the hood in a business all that much, because there's a competitive tension there. But it was interesting. Like, once we acquired them, it was like February 24th of 2021. Like, I went back to our board and was, look, like, we need like 3 to 6 months to say, like, what's next. Like, do we run 2 separate businesses? Do we combine the businesses? What is the strategy? Because we weren't completely able to do that before the acquisition. But it's been a great thing. I'm really proud of both teams, and
that's insane though. You guys acquired that business and we're not 100% sure of what direction you were going to go with it.
And now, that we just knew. I love the market share piece of it.
Yeah.
Like, I just knew the power of that many customers being united under one flag or one umbrella was going to give us a lot of momentum in some of the areas that we wanted to grow, especially like in the materials and in the fintech side.
So was that your main reason for bringing on Bain, was Co-Construct?
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so thinking about that strategic move, just bringing in an investment partner, you guys have bootstrapped this thing up until then, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, I think that's from like almost like a psychological standpoint, you've bootstrapped this thing, you've built this thing into a monster per se, 500 employees, it's a profitable company. And then all of a sudden you're like, let's bring in Bain Capital.
Let's bring the finance guys. Let's bring in the MBAs in. Yeah.
Let's bring some real, and
let's bring in some landscape business owners.
But what was that like? What was that decision making like? Because I feel, and myself included, right? And we are so emotional. Like, I'm speaking about builders and contractors. We're so emotionally invested in our businesses, where forget taking on money. People don't want advice. People don't want to go and hire a coach because I can do it myself. Right. They don't want to go take a course. I can do it myself. And then you bring in the level of, hey, I'll give you $2 million for a portion of your business, or however that deal is written, to help you grow. No, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
So what was that like at the scale of which you did it? What was that? What went through your mind?
It was honestly an emotional roller coaster. And I think it's just the only way you could relate it to is like just put yourself in the same situation where you're running a business and someone gives you money and to be your partner because they think they can help you grow and ultimately get a large return on that. And so, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning was like, look, these are some of the smartest people in the world, like literally the smartest people in the world, like, Harvard MBAs, Stanford MBAs, best lawyers in the world. And, I'm sitting in the exact same place, like negotiating with the smartest people in the world in my basement in Omaha, Nebraska. And you just kind of sometimes are like, it's just emotional. And sometimes you just got to say time out. Like, I don't freaking get what you're talking about. I don't understand. But you have to make the decision that, like, this is the right step for the business to really exponentially grow the right direction that you think it can go. We got to a place where Steve, Jeff, and I were, I think bootstrapping a business to 500 employees, profitable, huge company was like, for us, it was a badge of honor. We knew that this time was going to come. And when we had the opportunity to acquire Co-Construct, it was like, this is right. These are the right partners. But at the end of the day, money's cheap. And so what I mean by money is cheap, like you can go get $2 million or whatever it is there's a lot of people out there that want to give you money. And so what solidified it for me was the actual partners at Bain Capital. And, we've got 3 private equity firms, Bain Capital, HGC, and then Sarant Capital, which own a majority of Co-Construct. They rolled their entire stake into the new company because they believed in it so much. Like, I genuinely liked the people that were part of the deal. And if I didn't, there was no way we were going to do it. I mean, we were in a position where we were courted quite often by a lot of these investors. And I just like these guys. Like, when we have board meetings, we have fun board meetings. We'll play golf or we'll do something. We'll go out to dinner. We have drinks. Like, we truly enjoy being around each other. And like, life's too freaking short to have people you don't like being around. So, I always, when I'm talking to people like in a startup thing, like, choose your business partner like you're going to choose your spouse or your lifelong best friend, because if you build a great business, they could be with you for a long time. And, and you have ups and downs, right? I mean, like, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be days, where Steve and Jeff didn't want, and I myself, like over a 15-year period where we didn't want to talk to each other because that's just normal. But we truly were always had each other's backs and we were best friends and it worked out well.
It is true. And I don't know. I've never been in that position, but thinking of taking on a business partner where it's there's obviously some sort of financial compensation for that, and I can see the sweat equity that would go into that. But then you have somebody who wants to loan you money or give you money for the sake of making money on that money and on the investment. It's like you really have to do your homework.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that you would be courted by a lot of people who want to make as much money as they can on you, and they're not necessarily they don't have your existing business's best interest in mind. Yeah. So that's got to be a tough kind of relationship to build, where you're always like, what are you really in this for? Because at the end of the day, like, it's about making money.
It's about making money, and it's about doing the right thing, for your customers and the people that work in the organization. You're in business, money kind of makes business work. So like, it's not always rainbows and, fun cakes or whatever, but it's what I love about my partners, honestly, is they're super long. They have so much passion. I mean, our partners do like 2 or 3 deals a year. And so when they use, one of them uses this word conviction, like, I have conviction about this business. I have conviction about this industry. Like, they can be as long and patient, as they want to be. And I think that was pretty appealing to us, was they truly showed they had conviction and they knew our customer base. They did their homework. But God, it was so weird. Oh my God. I mean, it was like the craziest 3 months of my life.
That's got to be so intense and so stressful.
I mean, I was like the F-bomb king of, Zoom calls probably during that 3 months, but it was, my wife always tells, because we were home, she always tells the stories of like, listening to my conversations, and she's like, you're a certified psychopath. And I'm like, well, sorry.
It's like you get into business for one thing, and then you grow your business, and now you're dealing with all of these transactions and things on a completely different level. And
Yeah.
it's like everything that I've ever worked for and put into this, I'm putting in your hands.
Yeah.
I would just be ripping my hair out, and I'd probably just say, I don't want to sell this anymore. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I don't, I don't want investors at this point. Like, I'm good just doing the things the way that I am, just because I feel like the amount of stress that would put on you would be insane.
Yeah. It's crazy. I will tell you this though. I mean, I think it's relatable to the customers, our customers and the listeners is I will tell you that in the last 18 months, I've become, I believe, a 10 times better CEO of the business. The formality of having business partners, the accountability that I have today that I necessarily didn't have 18 months ago has been incredible. It's been a great learning experience for me. And like, our partners and our board members, they're not telling us what to do. They're not operators of the business, but they're like sounding boards, and they've been there and they've seen other businesses, and they ask really provocative questions. They push you in ways that you've never been pushed before. And there is this sense of like, look, they gave us something and we have to be accountable for that, and we have to deliver. That's my job. And so, I think if again, like I'm invested in a few other small businesses where I'm kind of like, the big bad, scary person, but I do think it can make you a much better contractor. And a lot of contractors kind of go from being a contractor, then potentially, dip their toes into development projects. And those development projects usually require outside capital and business partners. And if you're not ready to be accountable to people that give you money, and you're not willing to take direction, you're going to get your ass kicked, and it's going to be a really bad experience for you. And so, kind of being honest with yourself of like, what am I really getting myself into? Do I really want to take this step in this path? Because it exposes you in your weakest moments and your weakest spots, and I think that's what can actually make you better as a business owner.
I think the two stories on that. A friend of mine was telling me he owned a small business and he took on some big investors, and he said it was the weirdest thing. I checked my bank account one day, and there's just all of a sudden multiple millions of dollars in there that I was like, I didn't realize this is how it would be. And a friend of a separate friend is a real estate agent, and she was telling me about this property they were selling, and they kept cutting the price. And I was like, what's going on with that project? Like, why isn't it done? Like, what? And she was like, yeah, they had outside investors, and then they just partied, and they literally spent all the money partying. And it's the temptation, right? Where it's like exactly what you just said. If you're not prepared to have an exorbitant amount of money, more money than you normally would, because you're taking outside money, otherwise you do it yourself, right? Now, and have the opportunity to, like, the whole point of that money is to make money.
Yep.
And the temptation of being able to utilize that money any way you want, as long as you return it somehow, it's just that's, like you said, that's where people get in trouble.
They get in trouble. And, I get it's not for everybody. It's been a great thing for our business. I mean, we literally have doubled in size in 18 months.
Yeah.
From a headcount standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. So it's been really good, and I think it's really good for our customers. We've really shifted the way we've thought about our customers. I mean, when you're bootstrapped, everything you're thinking about is like even if you've got 500 employees, you're still like, how do we make money? Are we going to make payroll? Are we okay today? And when you have a little larger buffer, you get to operate in a way that's a little unique and different than, the bootstrapped way.
So in your case, it's probably a little bit of, what came first, the chicken or the egg, but was this something that these people have a general idea of what they can do with your business and come to you with this, like, such proposition? Or is it you guys saying, hey, we could potentially do this with the business, we want money for this?
Both. Okay. I mean, really, there's a thesis on the market, like, again, relating it back to, like, if you were going to develop a 12-plex in Boston, you have a thesis on that market and why you can do that and what prices you can get for it. And then somebody that comes to you potentially to be your equity partner may have a thesis, but it might be a little bit different, might not be the right block or the right street. So it's a little bit of both. But at the end of the day, we're the operators of the business. Their job is to find great investments and to deploy capital. Our job is to build a great company and make sure our customers are really successful.
So it's internally, you guys are developing that business strategy?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, and that's strat planning. I mean, God, we never did strat planning. And like, I mean, that was something that
What is
we
strat
would just
planning?
strategy planning,
Oh, strat,
like,
strat.
I mean, so it would,
Duh.
yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah. Right. So like here, I don't know about you guys. Here's how we,
That's two for me being an idiot.
that's a good question. I'm one of those private equity guys using big words. Uh, but like our strategy planning would literally like be December 21st for next year. We're like,
Yeah.
what should we do next year? And now we've got a team of 6-7 people that begin that process 6 months in advance. And
That's kind of why I asked, because I'm thinking like now somebody gives you money. Now you have accountability outside of your own self and the people involved. So it's like, okay, if not that you were messing around before, but like now we really can't fuck around. Like this is
100%
somebody else.
accurate.
So like you have all of these business professionals, businessmen and women, attorneys, MBAs, all of that stuff. And it's like you're going to come to them with your own mediocre business plan as to what you did for the past 5 years. And they're going to look at it and be like, no, we're not giving you money for this.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd have to come to the table with something very legit at that point.
Yeah, and we were good. I mean, I think we had a really good business rolling, and I think just a lot of the things that they brought to us were things that were scaling what we were already doing in a better way. And so it's just like any business, like what you don't know is you just don't know. And
Yeah.
so someone just lending you a hand saying, "Well, have you ever thought about using this strategy to find out how you can get to the next level?" It's like a light switch goes off, and they give you the template for it, and you just run with it. So it's been why, honestly, your point, Tyler, like what I said, 20 minutes ago, is like, I'm a much better CEO. It's because we brought those folks on and they've supported us.
Well, hearing your experience and listening to this and having kind of the backing that you do, not necessarily from a financial perspective, but just the professional backing and people to run these things by, it's almost as if you find the right team. It's a no-brainer. Like, how could you fail at this point?
That's, and sometimes I honestly think like, I wish I would have done this 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, because, you look at some of these companies, that did it sooner than we did in adjacent markets. And, they've had more success than us because they took money sooner. So, I think there's pros and cons to it. Again, it's always about, it goes back to the very beginning to our listeners and our customers. Like, if you're going to bring on a partner, make sure you trust your partner, make sure you can, live with them in the really bad times, and you can live with them in the really good times. And quite frankly, a lot of times where challenges come is not during the bad times, because when you're in a tough time, you put your heads together to figure out how to get out of the tough time. It's when you're having success and you're making money where like the conflict comes and where you should spend that money. And,
right.
We've had a really good economy in the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm sure some of our listeners have experienced that. But that's where like most conflict comes is, money causes problems in a lot of ways. And so saying like, hey, when we get to this level, if we're successful, how do we want to think about this? Getting prepared for those times, having those conversations early is really important.
That's true. How do you guys stay ahead of the curve as far as what's going on in the industry and what you're going to add to BuilderTrend?
Yeah, so we've got kind of, there's 3 ways you kind of look at this. Is your customers are your best source of kind of new ideas and innovation. And we've got a lot of customers. And so having customer conversations, you've got a strategy and a corporate development team that are basically out there sourcing all the good ideas. They're no good idea is unique. I think all good ideas are stolen, kind of as a Picasso line.
Yep.
That's no different in the world of, everything, whether it's cars or technology. And so if we hear about somebody, that's doing something interesting, we want to know what they're doing. And the last is we've just got a team of one of the things we've really put a ton of investment dollars is really our R&D, research and development. And so just building better software.
That was for you, Nick.
Yeah, research and development for our customers. And so and you're not always going to miss. You're not always going to hit it right out of the gate. But we're spending literally tens of millions of dollars on R&D every year to make our customers more successful.
So assuming that there's a lot of that is just going towards tweaks within the system and not creating entire new platforms, or kind of processes within your system. Is, hypothetically speaking, if you had something new that you want to integrate, how long does it take you guys to go from that concept to kind of putting it out there for the consumer?
It's almost kind of think of it as like a construction project. So obviously, the bigger the project, the longer it usually takes, or the more complex it is, the longer it takes. So, if it's something like if we're renovating a kitchen, it's going to take X amount of days. If we're building a whole new house, it's going to take longer, obviously. So it's not much different from a project management standpoint than what our customers are dealing with. The biggest thing is to make sure you're getting it right.
Yeah.
We've missed a few times. I mean, we missed on an estimates release, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and I'm comfortable saying that because we redid it. We had to go back and redo it, and it's integrated with our takeoff solution. And so there's times where we've missed, and you're not going to hit 100% every time. The goal is just not to hit less than 90%.
Yeah.
And that's when you can have problems. So it's just a matter of how big the scope of the project is.
So, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next was, how are you testing this new software or the changes? I think, if somebody puts a vehicle out, it's fairly easy to test that. And there's a very small sample that you can take on that, where it's like you have multiple different people who use this system differently. How are you testing that stuff before you're like, hey, here's the new software, check it out, and it's just a massive flop?
Yeah, so we've done that before in the last 16 years. We've made that mistake before, and so really it's about kind of releasing it on stage progression. So we've got 30,000 customers, not releasing it to 30,000 customers on today. It's you've got a group who wants to beta test. You've kind of got the techies out there who like messing around with new tools and want to be a sounding board for you, and then you release to maybe 1,000 customers, and release to 2,500 customers, release to 5,000 customers. And so that's how you should do it. That's how we are doing it today. That's not how we always did it. And we made some early mistakes because that wasn't our process. And part of that's just, you're trying to move fast, right? We release new code on our platform every single day. Every single day we're pushing out new software. And so you never know what a small item might do that really could blow something up and really be a problem. And that's happened again. Like, it can just, instead of it being one click, all of a sudden someone that button that they click on is not there, and it completely screws up their entire process. And like, there was just oversight, and that happens with software all the time, and especially when you're releasing every day. So, we've got a quality assurance team that's kind of pre-bugging it, and then, let our customers tell us if we're doing the right things.
So what, as far as what you were doing day to day now, I'm sure 16 years, 15 years later, your kind of daily roles and responsibilities have changed. What does a day in the life of you look like now?
It's better, honestly. it's a ton more responsibility. It's a lot more formalized on kind of how we do things. So I'm spending most of my time in high-level strategy meetings. And, quite frankly, at the end of the day, where I spend my two biggest areas is like, are our customers happy? And are the people that work at our organizations happy? And are they being successful? And so the people always ask me, what's your favorite thing about kind of your job? And it's the people side of both sides. It's our customers and it's the people. But quite frankly, it's also the hardest part of my job. Like, you have an angry customer, and that's challenging. Or if you've got an employee who's, dealing with something. I mean, we've lost, 4 or 5 employees to early deaths, folks in their 20s and 30s over the last few years. And like, wow. When you start a company, that just because you have 1,000 employees, like, that's very personal. And, it's been a really challenging couple of years with, COVID, and, there's a lot of social issues out there, and it's just, the best part and the worst parts usually kind of come together. I mean, I think that's just human nature. But, day to day, I'm dealing just with a lot of meetings on like, we've got 3 things that we're working on, and how are we progressing on those 3 things that, are core themes for, 2022 and 23.
Yeah, I'd say the people are probably the most difficult aspect of most jobs.
Yeah, and the most rewarding. and the most rewarding in some
And when
cases.
it's good, it's good. And when it's bad,
Bad.
it's
Oh god,
bad. It's good. When it's bad,
bad.
it's
Oh god.
bad.
I mean, it's the two extremes for sure.
So on the same lines of as people, what about recruiting? Was the Bain investment, was there a strategic discussion about this is going to give us an opportunity to recruit at a higher level? Like, what does recruiting look like for you guys, especially doubling in 18 months?
Yeah, it did. It gave us. They pushed us. The board pushed us really to hire some outside expertise that we didn't have.
What does
Um,
that mean?
Like, so for example, we have we're processing billions of dollars a year on our platform through, customer payments and, B2B payments. So you're paying your subcontractors. It's a big initiative that we have. And like, we're not even like scratching the surface on billions of dollars. Like literally that's like, single digit adoption from our customer base. And so like, we wanted to go find one of the best fintech payments players in the market, and we found a gentleman named Andres Ricarte who worked at Amex for 15 years, based out of New York City, young, hungry, like was working in vertical market software, and like we went out and like we used a headhunter and we found him, and he's our SVP of financial services, and he's an absolute rock star. We would have never been able to hire Andres before we did the deal.
So let's talk about Andres. So,
Yep.
and I'm going to relate this back to like construction and the smaller
Yep.
contractors, most people listening. This is a huge hire for you guys.
Huge. Yeah.
And, before Bain, like, was that position even on your mind?
Nope. Wasn't on our mind.
But you were still processing millions of dollars in dealing with financials. And they come in and they're like, hey, you need to hire someone as a, SVP of financial services.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like, like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
I actually say this all the time. If you think about your business, a lot of time businesses are like kind of act their age. Like if you're a 3-year-old business, you sometimes act like a toddler and you do stupid shit. And, sometimes when you're 14 or 15, you're finally like catching your stride and you're grown up and you're running faster, but you hit these brick walls all the time because you do stupid things. Mm-hmm. And so, us being 16 years old, it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like if you're going to build a business that's going to be 50 years old, I mean, what a great accomplishment. Like you could build a business that lasts for 50 years. Like where do you want to spend your time, your energy, and your investment? And we always just said, yeah, we think we can be a really big, a great partner to our customers on their financial services. But that was it. That was like the end of the conversation. It's like, what does that actually mean? Besides processing a few payments here and there.
So for you, like hiring Andres, right? How did you personally get over the thought of like, I don't have that position, I don't need that position, to making the decision to hire? Because I'm sure this person is probably also well compensated.
Yeah. So, I think it comes down to that accountability of like, look, what you don't know, you don't know. And being a really good kind of a leader around like, I can't do this all. I can't put a Band-Aid on it. And it's just, it's still going to bleed. And for me, it was like, if we're going to really make this one of our core initiatives, and I honestly would say this to any of our customers, like, what do you want to do next year, right? Like, what is your 2 things you want to accomplish next year? Don't talk about 10 other things. Don't talk about 20 things. Really focus on the 2 things that you want to accomplish next year. And what does it take to accomplish 2 things? I think so many times small business owners, and I was very guilty of this, is like, I try to do 10 things every single year because it was almost like a shotgun approach. Like if I shoot a shotgun, it's a better chance I'll hit something because, it's got a bunch of BBs in it, versus like kind of having this like laser focused rifle approach. Like, what if I put all my time and energy into these 2 things? Why is that scary? Because what if I fail on both, versus like give it kind of 20% on 5 things. And that really is the biggest difference we've kind of made in our business, is like, let's get laser focused on a couple things, not 10 things. And I think that translates really well to like small businesses of any size, quite frankly.
Yeah, I see that all the time. With people going into business, or even a lot of local restaurants that open up, and it's like, why are you focusing on so many things? Like do a couple of things really well, and then if you want to expand your reach, go from there. But like you can't give 20% to 5 things when you're especially when you're first starting out, because then you're not doing anything well.
Yep.
Like if you can do 75-25 or 50-50 or 100 and nothing, I think that you're going to get your feet kind of moving in the right direction. And I think at that point, then hopefully you have the infrastructure built up to be able to take on more things and put people in place where they're still only focusing on maybe 2-3 things at a time. But I see that so many times where I just want to like shake people and say, why so many things? Like, just do a couple.
Yep.
Do them really well too.
And Nick, you and I were talking about that earlier. Part of that is giving yourself the confidence and training yourself to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got to say no to certain projects, certain customers, certain clients. Like, even when you're getting started, like, if you're hungry for money and somebody says they need you to redo this bathroom, and that's not what your core focus is. Your core focus is kitchens or whatever. Like, you got to say no. And
the argument here, which I think a lot of people are probably thinking, is like, well, there's also, you don't want to grow too fast. And, and it's almost contradicting to what we're saying here, my CFO literally just texted me sent me an article and said, hey, let's not grow too fast because this company is like apparently firing 23% of its staff. But it's something I think about constantly where, when we're sitting here talking about don't, hire for the things that I'm not good at. I don't like estimating. Yep. And I have refused to hire an estimator I have no idea why. No idea why. And it's, and I keep finding myself like, making a really great hire and then like, all right, hey, they're really good at that job. They can also take on this role. And then I see them like their entire focus shifts to that other role. And I'm like, whoa, I need you back over here. It's like, well, now we need to hire someone. So it's this delicate balance of, obviously, I'm going to go back to something my dad has said. And I said this to you earlier, Dan, is like, he always said, you'll figure it out. Right. And, and I've always said it's the best and worst advice I've ever gotten, because, in one sense, it's not advice. In the other sense, it's reminding me that I have the ability to figure it out if something goes wrong. But in the immediacy of it is, you need that person in order for you to grow. So if you're looking to grow, that person needs to be part of the team. But let's put all of that, and then cover it with I'm almost changing the direction of this conversation is what, thinking back to 2008, thinking back to when you guys literally, it was like someone shut the lights off on you guys, and the state of where the economy seems to be, right? There's all these contradicting views, but in your personal view as to where BuilderTrend is right now, with the amount of capital that's been invested, with the amount of growth that you guys are experiencing, how much focus are you putting on the quote unquote state of the economy?
We've got the luxury of having a lot of data because we represent such a big portion of residential construction on remodeling and new construction. So our data is probably, is better than any data that you see in the press. Mm-hmm. Obviously starts are down, interest rates are up. Anytime interest rates go up, people are they clam up on how they want to spend money. And so, I think the state of the market's super interesting right now. And the big question is like, are we in a recession? And like, how you define a recession is also unique. Like, it's GDP growth. I do think we were residential construction just experienced probably 2 or 3 years of some of the best euphoria that you could have. What was interesting about that euphoria that was different than 2007 is couldn't get any materials and labor shortages. So a lot of our customers, the conversations I've had with them, that data doesn't really support, is like they couldn't even do the stuff they wanted to do. So they couldn't get in trouble. In 2007, everybody could get themselves in trouble because they could build as many specs, as they wanted. They could do these crazy projects. They could borrow for one job and use it for a different job. Like, you can't do that today. Mm-hmm. And so there's actually a pretty good amount of backlog. So you saw this really high kind of cancellation in contracts for new construction last month. But there's also this massive backlog of people that want to do projects. And the big question, I think, really is like, what does the next decade or next 5 years look like for the working population and migration? So are companies going to require people to go back into the cities and go back into, the jobs? And if that is the case, it changes probably the trajectory of like construction, because right now, I cannot tell you how many people I've met. I was interviewing someone yesterday out of Austin, Texas, and her comment to me was, "Yeah, we lived in San Francisco, but we just decided to move to Austin." They have 2 little kids, and I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Well, like the affordability down here is way better in San Francisco. The schools are better, and like we just thought it'd be cool to live in Austin. We can work anywhere we want." I mean, what a crazy, like from a migration standpoint, if that trend continues, you are going to see like unique markets, most likely under the Sun Belt, like gain a lot of momentum. And, I think people, the perspective will be lost at some point, but like, look, like people want what they want. Like that was a big wake up call, like being at home.
Mhm.
And so I do think there's a pretty long runway for our industry, but I wouldn't say I'm like the biggest bull right now on like, residential construction, like new home starts. I think there's going to be a pullback because interest rates just jumped 300 basis points,
I agree with that. I think that if things do slow down, I mean, I would assume that at some point things will slow down, but it's going to take a little bit of time just because there's so many people waiting that like my email and my phone does not stop ringing, and everyone says like things are going to slow down, and there's so many people who have been told no that still want what they want, like you said. And I think that that's it's going to lag on for a while after that.
Yeah, and I also think there's honestly like, I still think there's a huge gap in contractors. Like there's just from a high quality level of contractors that will, I use the example that we're talking landscaping earlier, but like just getting someone to show up to your house to give you a bid is like still a challenge.
Yep.
And so I think there's a massive opportunity out there. I think it's also a massive risk because it's just finding great people to work at your companies. You want the work, but if you don't have the people to do it, you can't take the work.
Yeah, and I think that it's been difficult for everyone because like you said, there is a ton of work. So you bring all of these people on board, but then you can't get product. So now you're shuffling people around and kind of staging projects. And I've even seen it with me. I'm small scale, so it's typically doesn't affect me, but I have customers who want me to come and kind of do things halfway until other items come in. And I was willing to do that for a bit. And I'm at the point now where it's like that it's more work for me and I'm getting paid the same amount.
Yeah.
So it really is tough to kind of stick my neck out there and have these jobs cost me money to please customers, where you can do that, to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, the conversation be had like, hey, if we're going to do this in these separate stages, it's going to cost this amount more because I have to set up and break down and then set back up. And it's not the way that it was before. So I think that there's a ton of work to be had, but it's tough getting subs on projects. It's tough getting material on projects. So projects are dragging on. You're putting people in different places and flip-flopping schedule. So I think that there's that to consider as well.
Yeah, the supply chain is helping. I mean, it's getting better. Because we own CBUSA, I've kind of got this, MBA in supply chain and construction materials over the last, 18 months. 12 months ago, like every supplier in the country was like, no, we've got so much backlog, we can't get material. Like, just give us a moment here. And I'd say in the last couple months, it's really caught up, thankfully. And you're starting part of what, it's funny in the market. It's like, Target was kind of a perfect example. It's like all of a sudden they had too much supply.
That's what I was just gonna say. It's like
there's no in between.
We have been, we've been renting storage units. It's like, hey, just order everything as soon as we know what it is, and we'll pay to store it because we don't know when it will show up.
Yeah.
And for us, I do, the thing I appreciate about it is that it's making our team think further in advance and like be diligent about getting this stuff figured out before we're in construction. But I was just gonna say, it's like, I know at some point, the appliances that we're ordering 16 months in advance are just gonna be like, hey, they're here, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm at foundation.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, we're going to sell them to another client, or you can pay to store them, and then you lose the warranty. It's like, I think that there's just going to be this, this moment where it's just, okay, here it is, everything at once.
It appears if retail is any indication, and I think there's certain categories depending on where they're getting, manufactured. I've heard like flooring is still there's a big backlog on flooring.
Yeah.
But some of the other categories are softening up. So, but what a crazy dynamic. I mean, what a crazy experience to live in. I've said this multiple times, but pandemic, crazy election cycle, crazy social issues. We've got a war in Europe, first time in 70 years. And at the end of the day, like there's still lots of opportunity.
Yeah.
Like lots of opportunity.
It's such a bizarre time.
It's such a bizarre world. And, nobody can tell you what's going to happen in the future, obviously, but, making your best decisions based on the information you have is all you can do.
Yeah. So I probably have one more question for you. I don't know about Nick. But we're kind of in the boat where we're looking to make some changes at this point, delegating some responsibility. So it's less on us to grow a little bit with the podcast, and be able to expand our reach. And we have relationships that we're building with customers, and partners where we're looking to implement kind of new systems. And I guess my question to you, being that that's something you've been doing for the past 16 years, is what does that look like from like the chalkboard to your first decision where it's like, hey, we want to implement this, or we want to be able to provide this service? What's the first move there? Is it hiring someone? Is it really developing a strategy? What does that look like?
Yeah. So again, I think it kind of goes back to our, let's not accomplish 10 things. Let's accomplish 2 things. And being okay with like getting really good at 1 or 2 things. And so, I think the first thing is like, what do we want to accomplish? Like, how do you storyboard that? Like, where are we struggling, and what are quick wins we can get from technology or from anything, or from hiring someone? And then it's like, basically you kind of list those things out and you put, what's your priorities? Like, what is your priority? What outranks other items that are on this list? And then the last part of that would be is like, okay, then who's going to own that? A throat to choke is what I like to say, is like, you got to have somebody that's accountable, whether it's yourself or someone else. It's like, who's going to own this project? I think I love that term, throat to choke. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but
I have no idea, but I'm using it.
Yeah, but it gets used a lot in my office. And I think you look at that, and then I would take a step back. A lot of people, they want to kind of like uncover every rock to figure out the right thing. Like, also be like mindful that like there's like probably you can look at 2 or 3 things, and my guess is one's going to taste like McDonald's, one's going to taste like Burger King, and at the end of the day they're going to achieve both your goals, and it's just a matter of like how you get there. And then you just want to make sure that the people behind it are real, that can support you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The hardest part is the first step, where it's like, we have all of these ideas, how do you get going with it? And it a lot of times it is just taking that first step, and things grow from there. But it's almost like you're frozen before taking that first step.
Yeah. What can make you money? Like, think about it that way. Like, what can you implement that will make you money from a new process that you're struggling with? And I think, when you kind of follow the money, usually you can start kind of picking things off that you want to accomplish.
I love
For
that.
sure.
Wait, in respect to money, my last question is, you mentioned a few times that you invest in other small businesses. What else are you investing in right now?
Vanity. It's all vanity.
All soccer teams. And,
I got a vanity you can invest in.
Yeah. So I'm invested in a lot of like kind of VC funds. I'm invested in an ag tech fund and some private equity funds. But personally, commercial real estate that I know in my backyard here in Omaha, Nebraska.
Cool.
And then a software startup kind of attacking it's a video management tool that's utilized by law firms and like police police stations or deputies. And then I'm invested in a staffing, like a medical staffing business, is what I'm working on right now. And there's another software company that looks at kind of the similar to a company I mentioned earlier, like spas and studios and hair salons that I'm also investing in.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Dan, you didn't stretch once. How's your back?
I don't know. I'm kind of frozen right now. I must feel good. So
the drugs are working.
As soon as I get up, I'm going to walk upstairs and I'm going to, just complain to my wife about how painful this day at work was. And
she's going to call us and be like, listen, next time reschedule.
She's been like a caretaker for the last 5 days. She's pretty glad that I'm not in her business right now. So.
Well, I appreciate you being on and powering through this, and it was a really cool conversation.
No, I appreciate it. You guys are doing great things, and I love this industry. Both of you guys in this podcast, you're a champion of the industry, and
appreciate that.
I think it's cool. There's so many cool things that this industry can accomplish, and I love the way it's being viewed. It's been changed just through the last 15 years, the lens, the way people look at the projects that we're working on, what we're accomplishing, what you guys are accomplishing. I love a shout out to all the listeners. Keep doing what you're doing. It's good stuff.
Cool, man.
Sweet, man. Thank you.
All right, fellas. Thanks.
Yeah, he's hot shit. It's interesting. Like I'm very curious to see how the economy reacts over the next just 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's something that, as I said, Nicole just texted me, like literally sent an article of this company firing 23% of their staff and says, let's not do this. I'm like, of course I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But the other side of me is like, I also want to hire 4 people right now.
Yeah.
And it's, we had a talk yesterday. It's like, we're talking about hiring literally 4 more people. And it's this back and forth of, do I hire or, but it's the risk, right? That's the risk of growth. And you have to be uncomfortable.
It's having good morals,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not going to hire and bring somebody on only to let them go in a short amount of time. Like all of these people are taking a risk in you as well. And you want to create an environment for them, a long-standing environment that's, not going to be a temporary job position for them. You'd like to create something where they can stay and grow and trust their investment in you. So I think that's the tough part there, where you have morals and you want to do best for these people, best for your own business. But you do have the risk of what's going to happen in a year, what's going to happen in 2 years.
Yeah. And I said it in the podcast, but I've been approached by other companies that are like, hey, would you just acquire my company? And I've reached out to people that have their own businesses and say, cause I see like through social or even chatting with them one-on-one that they don't like running a business.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if you just come work for me? They're like, no, I make more money doing it on my own. I'm like, but is it worth it?
Yeah.
And, and for me, I'm like, of course I think about the money side of it, where it's like, all right, if he makes X amount of dollars, I can't pay him that based on, the position he would fill. But what else on top of a salary could I put into place that he would control how much money he made?
Yep.
Maybe he leads to additional sales and I share a percentage. And that's the interesting side for me. And because I think some of the best people or some of the best employees are currently right now, they're running their own businesses. And they're doing it because of the financial side of it. And there's no structure for them to leave and then make equal amount of money.
Yeah, because right now the way that our industry is structured and has been structured for the past, 30 years, as things have just gotten so much, the cost of living has gone up and inflation has gone up, that it's very difficult to survive off of a salary. So a lot of the guys and girls who own their own business, they're doing so because they feel as though they don't have any other option.
Yeah. And that sucks. Makes me think. But
for sure.
Guys, head over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. No new reviews this week, but if you guys want some free swag, leave us a review. Make sure you include your handle at the bottom. We will send you some swag. If you want to purchase some swag, head over to head over to the link in our Instagram profile, and click on there. You can buy some streetwear, as we call it.
Streetwear, or you get streetwear for free by leaving reviews.
Leaving the review. And that would be coming from one of our sponsors, Upstate Merch. And a big thank you to Upstate Merch, Rockwool, and Duration Molding and Millwork.